modify your thoughts. The thoughts we have are responsible the life we have because it all starts in our mind. The thoughts
Yeah.
that we entertain are going to make a huge difference if you stay in that place of suffering or you move to that place of love.
Welcome to another episode of Threads of Enlightenment. As usual, guys, I take this time to welcome our guests because they're coming to with a couple of things I deem very expensive: time. 24 hours has been offered to every one of us. What we do with our time will tell a lot about you. The other is the journey. The journey is a powerful creator. It has created this individual before us. And so I want to engage in a conversation because that journey has deposited some things in her that we want access to: wisdom, knowledge, insight, all of those wonderful things. And so we are honored to have her. And I wanted to honor her and thank her for coming and spending both of those precious commodity with us here at Threads of Enlightenment. Ligia, welcome to Threads of Enlightenment. How are you?
How are you, Ken? Thank you so much for having me. It is very special to be in your
Excellent.
company. And yes, it's so beautiful to be in the podcast and to be talking about these things, these topics that not everybody, touches upon. Sometimes people just want to stay away from them.
Yeah.
However, they are so sacred and they're
Yeah.
so important that I am so honored to be here with you.
Excellent. This is the question I usually ask everyone because I think it's a poignant question. And it's based on the second aspect of our journey, if I said, if you will, that servant aspect of our journey. And the question to you is this: how do you serve mankind?
With my heart, with all my love. And I love people. I love people.
Yeah.
I think I say this a lot. Love is the most powerful emotion. And I work a lot with grief.
Yeah.
Where my heart is to help the griever, the bereaved. And I always say that we grieve so much because we love so much.
Yeah.
It's like the other side of the coin. And so that's how I serve.
Let
Just
me
bringing.
introduce yourself. Let them know your name and then we'll.
Okay, thanks. My name is Ligia Houben. I am from Nicaragua. I live in Miami, Florida, and I have a story, a personal story, the reason why I do what I do. You know that they always say like, what's your big why? Well, this is
Yes,
a huge why. This is a
that is
huge why.
awesome.
I didn't know at the time. I did
Yeah.
not. However, I am a believer as well, and God just put me there, in this big why. And that's how I, developed as a woman and as a professional. I lost my father when I was 12 years old in Nicaragua.
Yeah.
I was very close to him, Ken, and I was a third of three women. I was 12, as I said, and it was a sudden death. It was because of the
Oh,
heart, his aorta. So it was very, very painful. Besides being so close to him, and it was sudden, unexpected. That huge loss is what eventually, with time, took me to study what I did. I studied psychology, grief and loss, thanatology, which is the study of death and dying. And it is interesting because when I was taking the class on death and dying at the University of Miami, and this was through the religious studies department, because I did my major in psychology and I did double major in religious studies as well, because that's where this course was offered, death and
yeah.
dying. And Ken, that was like a magnet to me. I had to take this course. I said I had to. So when I took it, I found out why. I knew
Yeah.
why. Because I had not really processed all that grief that I had experienced because of my father's death. So each time I went to class, I would cry. I would
Yeah.
cry because I was really getting into what grief was and all that. And that's when I found my mission in life. That's when I found my purpose. And I said, I want to do this. I want to help the griever that maybe they don't even know they're grieving, because I
Yeah.
was super happy. I was very, joyful and all that. However, when I was confronted to the topic, my heart broke. So that's why I was inspired to do that. And that's how I developed into this world of helping the bereaved.
So here you are, this young girl suffered the grief and an intense grief, being that your dad, you were so close to him, and it propelled you into studies. And you said you were happy and all this type of stuff, but while you were in class, you were discovering things. What were some of those things that you were discovering that brought you to the point to realize, wait a minute, I haven't really dealt with it. I thought I did because I'm happy and everything is going well, but you're gaining knowledge. What did it expose in you to show that, wait a minute, I haven't even begun?
What a profound question. I don't think anybody has asked me that. Wow, what a profound question. Because I thought that grief is only expressed through crying, and when my father died, I cried a lot. I cried a lot. And my mom was very religious. I was religious. So we found a lot of comfort, in our religion, which was beautiful. And life continued. Now, when I was exposed to this course that we talked about what death is, and of course, talking about death and dying, and talking about if you have had loved ones, who died. So you are exposed totally to what happened to you. So I was taken back many years, before. Now, the fact that grief, and I've emphasized a lot now, as a professional in this, the fact that grief is not only expressed through our emotions, it is not only expressed through sadness, it can be other emotions. So in that case, I didn't experience either guilt or anger, any of those. I was super sad when that happened. But then it can be represented physically. You may have stomachache, you may have backache, migraines, insomnia, lack of appetite, losing weight, all those things. The social aspect, you may withdraw, or you may, cannot be at home because you cannot be alone. So you can overwork, all those things. And then, of course, the spiritual, which I pay a lot of attention. We may get upset, with God sometimes because what happened, why this happened to me, that is a big question. And many people have that. Or you may be unable to forgive something that happened. You may be unable to do that. On the other hand, you may get closer to God. You may get closer to church. You may find meaning in what happened. You may find hope. So it depends where we are, because grief is so unique. And that's when I realized that I'm like, oh my God, grief can be expressed in so many ways. And that's when it hit me. It's when it hit me that it could be expressed. And I developed, I had an eating disorder back then. And after reflecting on that, of course, it's that void that I had. So for me, it was an eye-opener,
That is an intense eye-opening, if you will, because as you said, each individual, and again, it's based on the individual and their upbringing and their perspective and so forth, as to how that grief will impact that individual, whether it shows up as it did in your case, anger and all the other things that it manifests. So that is a wonderful observation as one is in class, again, getting all this knowledge. As you began to work on yourself, if you will, as you are seeing and recognizing the need that, wait a minute, it hasn't, what tools did you bring in? You speak of the religious aspect, the spiritual aspect of that, and I know that is going before God and having those conversations. But what other tools did you bring in to assist you? Again, because you're in class and you're learning of tools as well. What other tools did you utilize to move you from that pain that you were to a space now of becoming one that is healing?
Thank you. Well, first, like with the anger, in my case, I didn't experience that. It's common. It happens a lot. But in my case was, the eating disorder that I mentioned. The tool was to talk about it, to express, to talk about this. And because after class, of course, my professor, and I loved him, and he became my mentor. He was the chair of the religious studies department. So, of course, he saw me crying every single time. After class, I would go to him, to his office, and I talked to him, and I explained, because he was this woman, what's going on with her. And I explained to him, I shared that my father had died. And I never went in my country, never went to either to therapy or either to support groups, because it didn't exist. It didn't exist. So the fact that I could name it, I could name what I was feeling, that's what we call grief. I didn't even know about the word, because remember, I'm Hispanic, from Nicaragua. So even the word, it was something that, wow, this is grief. And so the ability to express it, to name it, to recognize it, and to accept it. Yes, because it is so interesting. And I said this when I presented, I remember My first book about loss, it was dedicated to my father's memory. Transform Your Loss, Your Guide to Strength and Hope. And when I presented it here in Miami at Books and Books, I said this, I am very open talking. I love to express because I like to be real. I like to be authentic, not wearing a mask.
Yeah.
If I am in this world to help people and I want others to heal and I want others to be open, it starts with me. Because if I am
has to.
pretending, then forget it, you know. So I like to be
Yeah.
open, and I said this when I was in Books and Books that I had accepted my father's death intellectually.
Uh-huh.
Intellectually, yes, he died. I was never in denial. He didn't know he died. It was horrible, painful. Yes, he died. However, stay there. It had not really come to my heart. I had not really accepted his death emotionally because I just didn't know how. I imagine I didn't have the tools. So that course for me was such a blessing, because it made me realize and that acceptance from the heart. And it's incredible because with that acceptance and all that, the relationship with my father that was always there, but it came more alive in a beautiful way because so present. My father's so present in my life. And my mother, eventually that she died 5 years ago, they are so, I was blessed with, beautiful parents and they are there. And I said like, wow, I was able to move because I didn't know that I was there from a place of suffering because I didn't realize that I was there because I was not really exposed to that until I started talking about it to a place of love.
Yeah.
And that's what I like to help people with, to be able, applying tools to move from a place of suffering to a place of love.
Yeah, and one of the main steps that, again, I dealt with grief and I've interviewed many folks with grief. And one of the main steps that one must deal with is the Bible has a principle. It says, and you shall know the truth and the truth will make you free or set you free. Once you identify that truth, that situation, that trauma, and again, you named it. And once you were able to name it, and that knowledge, because that's what truth is, you shall know, and that knowledge will give you be able to access your freedom. So here you are beginning and gaining your freedom, if you will, in this class. The mentor is there, and you recognize that the process is from moving from suffering to love. As you are now walking that path, if you will, from suffering to love. Tell us, how did you achieve that? Because you're going to be dealing with a lot of negative thoughts that are going to be coming to you, a lot of negative feelings, all the different things will be passing by and visiting you for a little while. And then you have to make the decision if you're going to accept that thought and make it a reality in your life. How did you transition from the suffering aspect? And again, you got the knowledge, but that's just the beginning. You've got to walk now every day, every day, every day. How did you begin to walk every day from suffering to love?
Thank you. So profound. It starts with that acceptance, acknowledging, knowing where you are, because it is a choice. What we do with our loss, it's a choice. We cannot control the event, and we know that. And I reconfirmed that 5 years ago in June 7th, when I lost my centenarian mother, that she was my mother and father after my father died for 48 years. So I reconfirmed what I have been saying for many years. And it's making that choice, recognizing the pain to start dealing with, as you said, from suffering to love, recognizing the pain, acknowledging it, validating it, not ignoring it, Ken. We live in a society that it is beautiful in many things, and in others, we want to have a space that sometimes we are not okay.
Yeah.
And it's okay. It is part of life. I don't know where we got this idea, and I say this sometimes in the seminars, that life was going to be everything laughter and everything joy. And I don't know where we got this idea, but life is life, and it has these painful moments. They exist. They're part of life that make us, and it's acknowledging that. It is validating that. I am sad because what makes me sad? Because I like to emphasize also not to ask, why am I sad? Why am I angry?
Yeah.
Why do I feel guilty? All those emotions that are very common. No, what makes me sad? What makes me angry? what makes me guilty? What makes me? So you can validate the emotion, because when we use why, or when people ask us, why are you sad? Why are you angry? It is that sense of judgment, and we may get defensive. So it is better when we go like, what makes you? What makes me? We dig in. So that's something that can help you move from suffering, accepting, recognizing every single emotion. Do not ignore it, validate it, process it, talk about it, write about it, vent, go out for a walk. Exercise is, in my mom's case, it helps me so much because you change the energy, you vent, moving helps a lot, when we are with a strong emotion inside. And then we can release that emotion and we can start healing. And then we make a decision. Okay, instead of feeling this, what I was feeling, how would I like to feel? I love to choose peace. I love peace. So I would do that a lot with my mom, especially because with my father's, I didn't know back then,
Yeah.
So that would be the first step when you want to move from this place of suffering to the next level of love is recognizing your emotions, not judging them, acknowledging them, validating them, processing them, and then you can heal, you can release. That is a thing that I emphasize with my people. I accept every single emotion. I have never to this day said anyone, being a professional or personal, like family, friends, I don't feel that way. Don't feel like that. No, I don't, because we have the right to feel anyway. It's just what we're going to do with that emotion, how we're going to express it. And because if we internalize it, Ken, and you know this, sometimes it's worse because then it grows inside of us. It grows inside of us, and then that can become a huge burden. That's why it's important to acknowledge it and to process it.
I hope you guys were listening to that and heard what was said, because that is the key in moving through from suffering to love. It is the key. One must validate your emotion, because if you suppress it, it has to manifest somewhere, and it'll show up in behavior, it'll show up in attitude, it'll show up. But you have to learn how to be in it, accept it, walk through, think about it, become the observer in that space, in that pain, and you will gain much insight. As you graduated and you were working at this thing for many years, and I know I want to get to mom because there was some time that got by. She's 100 years old and so forth, and you've lived a life where you've seen people in trauma and the pain and so forth, but you are now going to be revisited again as a individual, because as a young girl at 12 years old, you became familiar, if you will, with death and the results of that. Talk to us now as mom has become mom and dad and your confidant, your source of engagement and all of that. And now she is going through her time where she surrenders her body and she's exiting, going to the next realm. How did you handle that? Because here you are a professional for so many years, you've gone through, but there's this thing about us still being human. So how did you handle mom with all of that knowledge? What happened to you?
Thank you. Yes, exactly. I loved what you said, but you are human. Yes, I'm human. And I was very vocal, very open talking about that because I had my challenges, as you said, with, people telling me things, I'll tell you. Because when, after I studied and all that, and then my mom came one day and she's like, this is many years ago. She said, she called me Lijita, write a book about your dad. My mom adored my father. My father was very well known in my country, Nicaragua. He was a self-made man and he was so good, Ken. He was so good with people. He was a philanthropist. He loved people. And to this day, his name still, people, you are, Juan Martinez's daughter and all that. Because he was really good. He was a really good man. And my mom said, why did you write a book about your father's life? Because he has a story. We all have a story. I said, okay, mommy. So I started writing, but that book, his biography, which I eventually wrote it, but back then it didn't come out. The biography, I said, mommy, what came out, I said, is a book dedicated to his memory. And I mention it because of, you're going to, see why I'm mentioning this. And there is where I introduced a methodology I created to help people transform their loss and transform their lives. It's called the 11 Principles of Transformation. They were introduced in that book. And I developed that, into seminars, workshops, online programs, the 11 Principles of Transformation. Then, many years after, my mom, as I said, she died 2 months before 101. So she was frail. She had, still her mind well and all that. And we were extremely close. I mean, she was the apple of my eye, my mom. I was her caretaker. And at the same time, I was, working and all that. And she was my companion. She was adorable, Ken. When I say she was adorable, she was adorable. She was the sweetest, adorable person, and she was very enthusiastic. Like if you would come to her and say, Alicia, I had this problem. She would say, what's up? So she was like this positive woman. Okay. Yeah. So very close. She died, even though, she was in hospice because she was frail. And then it was little by little, she died in peace. It was a peaceful death. It was, if we can even say, a beautiful death, and I am so thankful to God that she died like that. However, the pain and the void, huge, because she was a constant. Besides being my mom, she was a constant in my life. Everything. She was there, and she lived with us. Her last years, she died. She lived with my husband and I. So after she died, super painful. It was horrible. It was this void, and that's what I said in my latest book. Allow me to live my grief and heal from the inside out. I shared a lot. And that I felt that it was like surreal, what I was living. And I even say, somewhere there, are we really prepared? Because intellectually, we go back to the intellectual. I was prepared. My mom was going to die. She's 100. She's in hospice, all that. She's frail. But when it happened, it's like this thing that I felt that something was taken out of myself, my body, my essence. And it's like a thing, no? Okay. What happened? I had 2 experiences that I want to share with you. One of them was because this was in COVID time, in 2020. And she didn't die of COVID, as I said, of old age, but it was in that time. So when I went back to the building, because remember that we were not seeing people, and so someone told me, I haven't seen you. Did you have COVID? I haven't seen you. I said, no, I lost my mom. It was so hard. And she's like, she was super compassionate and, loving and all that. And then I said, my beloved centenarian, the lady changed with good intention, but she changed. She's like, centenarian, you should be happy that she was a centenarian. And I understood, was, as I said before, super grateful to God. However, and the void, so I had a challenge, 2 challenges. One, because she was a centenarian, like I wasn't supposed to be sad. That's sad. She was centenarian. That's one. And the other one was this experience. That's why I had to mention the principles before. A lady called me, adorable lady, adorable. She called me up maybe 2 weeks after my mom had died and said, I knew, she called and she said, Ligia, I know that your mother died. And how are you? And I said, terrible. She said, terrible. Yes, I said, it's just, it's such much pain. And she's like, what about, no, but you are an expert in grief, she said. What about your principles? She said that. What about your principles? Yes. Can you imagine? And I'm like, my principles. I said, well, she had, no, I cannot, those are things that, come to your way. Come your way, and that's it. And I said, she had taken my seminar, the 11 principles. And I said, yes. I said, do you remember when you came to the seminar? I said, and do you remember principle 2nd? Live your grief. And I said, that's what I'm doing. I am living my grief. And she understood because she didn't say it wrong. She wanted to take me away from pain because that's what people want. They want to take you away from pain. But I was very vocal when I was in pain. And let me tell you, I am so glad I did it because I was so present. And before you used a word, you said that to observe, you become the observer, you said not too long ago. So interesting that you use that word because when my mother died, I found myself being an observer of my thoughts because it was a dual experience. It was the bereaved daughter, and the person specialized in grief, expert, whatever, the professional. So I was like observing, and it helped me so much because it has helped me so much even. And I still, I tell my mom, Mommy, you're
Yeah.
still helping me, after dying, because
Yeah.
it has helped me so much to be even more intense and close with my
Yes.
people, because you
Yes.
have been raw. You have been
Yeah.
raw there, and you are more in connection,
Yes.
So I am glad I have lived my grief the way I have, very openly, very in touch with the
Uh-huh.
emotions and being mindful about my grief, because
Yeah.
I wouldn't be how I am. And I have been, thank God, like this for some time, many years now, because I was present.
Yeah.
And when I have lived my grief, I have been able to heal from the inside out. Because healing doesn't mean that we forget. Of course not. Healing doesn't mean that we have those tsunamis that they
Yeah.
come from time to time, because as Rosenblatt says, grief is recurrent. It's just that I found peace. It's a combination, it's a grief, but it's peace, because
Yeah.
I was able to move from suffering to love.
Yeah. It is. When my mom died, both my parents passed, and I was the caregiver as well for my parents.
We
When
close this.
when my mom died, I didn't have a chance to grieve because I was the eldest and I had to make sure everything was going right and coordinating all of this stuff. And I knew I had days that I cried, but I didn't get to really grieve the whole thing because again, I had to stay present and get everything in order and all that stuff. And I knew, because, I knew that one day that day is going to come where I'm going to have to really go in and deal with grief. And sure enough, it was several years later. I think it was like 2 years later. I was in the midst of something, and all of a sudden, the memory and the emotions and everything came at me. I remembered something that my mom usually say and do, and when I did, it came crashing. And just like you know, we've been talking about, I knew, because again, I've been through and listened to people, that I had to go in, sit down, and began to allow myself to experience all of it. The entirety of the mess. And I was
Yeah.
on the floor. This was my best friend. I was on the floor. I was laid out, and snot all over the place, and just a big mess. And I knew that I had to stay there because I knew if I did not, I would not come up healed. But if I stay where I'm at, get into it, allow it to drench my being and to come out and let it saturate me and become that pain for that moment. And when I got up, I knew I would be healed. And so I didn't rush it. I allowed myself to grieve to the fullest. And guys, when you get into that space, I promise you, you've been listening to us, we've been discussing it. When you get there and you allow the emotion to become raw, what a place to be. And when you get up, there's a deep cleansing that the being feels. And once you're up, you're then able to move through into your process to gain your healing and to acquire a deeper appreciation came out, a deeper appreciation for my mother and all that she was in my life. And it was the most beautiful experience. So get there, guys. It is important that you get there and allow yourself to feel it. Because society tells us to be, especially men, big boys don't cry and all kinds of nonsense that they tell us. But when you become vulnerable, and allow yourself the opportunity to express your emotions to the fullest. It is one of the most powerful things you will ever do. There's no weakness there. It is one of the most powerful things that you will allow yourself the time to grieve. That's a powerful decision. And so I invite all of you guys that are women, anyone, men, you guys haven't grieved yet. Could be a death. It could be a divorce. It could be a sickness. You haven't grieved yet. Go ahead and give yourself permission to grieve so that you can get your healing. So after you've done that and I love that the woman toss your profession straight at you. You were skillful enough in your process that you're able to point her to that. For the audience sake, and you guys go and buy her books. We're going to provide the links for you guys to get to her book and all of her books and so forth, so you can learn about those 7 steps. For the audience sake, go through them briefly and make them acquainted of it. And again, you guys are going to have to go and get the book to get the meat of what that thing is, each one of those principles are. But I wanted her to just to give us a glossy, quick insight into what they are.
Okay, thank you. It's beautiful what you said before to your audience. Such a powerful message because you said 2 words. I love listening to you. You're so deep, and you said 2 things for them to give themselves permission. That is a big one because sometimes it's the griever themselves that sometimes they don't give themselves permission to grieve. So that is extremely important. And the other one that I love that word, actually I do, vulnerable. It is so powerful to be able to show our vulnerability because that shows that we are humans. Remember that you started with that word, human? Yeah, because that shows our humanity. So thank you for that. Now I'll tell you about the principles, and I want to say something else that I have. I don't know if you know actually, but I have an audio. I hope not to, maybe in the near future to have the video.
We're going to make sure you guys get all of her stuff. Go and learn because no one has all the answers. So go and learn. Get knowledge.
No, and exactly. In the podcast, what I like, what I did with the podcast is this. It's an audio, so it's in Spotify and Apple Music, in audio platforms. And it is bilingual. It is English and Spanish. And it is the same topic. Short messages, between 8 minutes to 15. Short messages to the point. So I have the different topics, and people can choose. I want to hear everything about grief. It's called Transforming Grief. Transformando el duelo in Spanish, transforming grief in English. So people can choose the topic they feel that resonates with them, that they may, I want people to feel accompanied. So that's why I have it. So I wanted to say that. Now, about the principles. I'm going to give you in a nutshell what the principles are. The first one is accept your loss, knowing that that is a process itself. That if we do not accept what has happened to us, and acceptance doesn't mean that you're okay with what happened. That doesn't mean that. It means that you come to terms with the reality. This is what has happened to me. That is painful. That is, yes, it is. It's a fact. This happened. That's the first one, because that is what allows us to make a decision. What are we going to do about it? So accept your loss. The second one that I mentioned before is live your grief, because I don't intend to say accept and that's it. You continue. No, you accept that a loss happened. Then grief comes in because the definition, the grief definition is grief is the natural and unique response to loss. So if there was a loss, obviously it's going to be grief. So the second one, live your grief. The third one is develop your spiritual dimension. And here I talk about the spiritual tools that I believe are very powerful: forgiveness, gratitude, and love. The fourth principle, express your feelings. Instead of concealing them, instead of wearing the mask, I am okay, I am strong, and inside you are devastated. No, express your feelings. Number 5, principle 5 is share with others. What we're doing here, we're sharing. You're sharing with your beautiful audience. They're listening to us. To share with others, share with people that listen to you. If you want to belong to a support group, talk about it. And with people that will not judge you, will just allow you be, and just hold the space. Number 6, hold the space, yes. Number 6, take care of yourself. Because that happens, and that happens, that when we are in pain, when we are grieving, we may not want to take care of ourselves, and the thing is that we didn't have control over the loss we experienced. Still, we have control over how we take care of ourselves. So that is something very important. Physically, mentally, spiritually, take care of yourself. Number 7, do rituals. Doing rituals helps us a lot, because it's like when we do a ritual, and they would ask me this. I used to teach at the university, world religions. at one university and the other one deaf and dying. I ended up teaching. I didn't tell you, teaching deaf and dying eventually. No, but when I mentioned in the religion class, ritual, a ritual is when we do something that has a special meaning to us. So doing rituals, lighting a candle, writing a letter, cooking a meal that your loved one loved, doing something, to honor them. All those things are rituals. Number 8, live the now. Live the now. And it's what we call now mindfulness. Because when I wrote my book, I wrote first in Spanish. It was back in 2007, 18 years ago, that we didn't have much the word mindfulness back then. I would have called it, mindfulness, but I call it live the now, because the now is the only thing we have. Instead of dwelling in the past, instead of worrying about the future, I don't say don't plan the future. It's different. Instead of worrying, live the now. Be present with your grief. Be mindful with it, just as you did 2 years after your beloved mother died, that you were so present. That's being mindful. That's the way that we can start healing. So mindfulness is extremely important. Live it now. Number 9, super important. Modify your thoughts. The thoughts we have are responsible the life we have, because it all starts in our mind. The thoughts that we entertain are going to make a huge difference if you stay in that place of suffering or you move to that place of love, knowing that we can do this. We are able. We're so resilient. When we believe in ourselves, when we love ourselves, and we allow our thoughts to take us there, it is possible. Number 10, principle 10, rebuild your world. Having taken the loss in. It's part of you, it's part of your story, it's part of our stories, our losses. So rebuild that world. When they say that phrase, picking up the pieces? So that's what we do. And when we have all that, then comes principle 11, which is visualize the life you want. Because we are the architects of our own destiny. And it depends on us how we transform this that has happened to us, that we transform it. And we, many times, and this, Ken, we become a better version of ourselves because of what we experienced. We hear so many stories. We create stories. So it's up to us to become that better version, more loving, more caring, more compassionate, more understanding of the pain of others, and making a difference in this world. Because if we can touch one soul we can touch, we make a difference. So sometimes people say, pero what can I do? What can I do? How can I? No, one person we touch. That's it. You don't know if you made that life better, just as you did, as you shared your story with me. What inspired you to start this? You can imagine you started with one soul and see how many souls you're touching. Isn't that beautiful? Yeah.
It is a beautiful journey. And what Ligia talked about, Guy, that's personal development. I can't say anything else. Those are the principles of personal development. I call them spaces. Those are the 11 spaces that you have to visit as an individual and spend time there at each and every one of them in order for you to become a mature individual. There is no other way. And I just want to thank you for coming here at Threads of Enlightenment. This has been a great, wonderful conversation. Guys, everyone, we're going to put together all of our links, get to the podcast, the books. The books goes into deeper about these principles. You need to know about them because revelation resides within the book and in the podcast. Go visit, become familiar, become a disciple, because disciples change the world, not visitors. Visitors just go and pop into another podcast, but become a disciple. You begin to listen and you transition from listening to hearing. Those who have ears, let them hear. And once you hear your inner man, your subconscious being, you will receive your desired outcome. Thank you so much for coming to Threads of Enlightenment.
This has been such a powerful, spiritual, profound experience. It has been such a pleasure to speak with you. You are a very special person. So I thank you for opening this space, to allow me share my message with your audience and with the world. And thank you so much. It has been very, very gratifying to talk with you. Thank you so much. I continue the day with my heart totally fulfilled. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. And blessings. And we'll take care
Blessings.
of you. We'll send you
Thank
all
you.
the links and everything for you to check and make sure that everything is all right. So thank you so
Thank you.
much.
Bye-bye, kid.
Bye-bye.
Thanks for tuning in to Threads of Enlightenment with Ken Primus. Hopefully you're now feeling more empowered to overcome the challenges in your life, whatever they may be. Share that inspiration with others by telling them about this podcast, rating it, and of course, remember to subscribe so you don't miss a single episode. For more connection, you can find us on Facebook and Instagram by searching for Threads of Enlightenment. Until next time, stay enlightened.